All right, we have Andrew Saunders in the house. Andrew, this is technically our second interview. I interviewed you once at Consensus, and I swear I tested the DJI devices to make sure that they sync with my camera. But for whatever reason, when I went live with you, the camera audio input was picking up the sound and not the DJI devices. So we tried, my girlfriend helped me. We tried to edit it as best as we could, but it was just, you said so much good stuff on that, on that interview that I don't know. I felt like I don't want to compromise the integrity of the quality or compromise the integrity of the interview by putting out something with subpar quality. So I have a little bit of a better setup today, and you have, in my opinion, a bit of a snazzier outfit on today. I love the visor.
Yeah, it's a new shirt. Yeah.
Tell us about the visor.
The truth was the interview got so fiery that we melted the mics. That was the problem.
That might have been it. How you doing today, man? You're a busy guy.
I'm good. I'm a little jet lagged. I was just in Lisbon to meet all our developers. Most of them are actually from Ukraine. Amazing, talented folks. And then I actually had to pop over to Geneva for a wedding. So I was with the family for a couple of days. Very rare that I take time off from crypto. I'm usually like 24/7. So yeah, still catching up from the jet lag, but yeah, doing pretty well.
Okay. So Andrew, let's take it from the top before we get diving into all the things that you've accomplished in and outside of crypto. Tell us a bit about yourself. Who is Andrew Saunders? What should the audience know about your origin story? Anything and all things.
Yeah, sure. So, so it started when I was really young. I didn't come from money. And so, there's all these funny stories that I have, but was pretty much hustling since I was a kid, started working when I was a teenager and really never stopped. And now I'm, obviously in my 40s. My first job, funny enough, I helped bring hip hop to the suburbs. So I'm actually a lot older than I look, and these sunglasses are probably not age appropriate, but yeah, I was helping Tommy Boy Records, who at the time was kind of like the kings of hip hop on MTV, bring that music out to kids in the suburbs and start to really expand the footprint of those artists, and then candidly interned at places like Universal Records, Sony Pictures. I worked on the Spider-Man movies back in the day, and just kind of knew that I wanted to be in Hollywood because I've just always been very passionate about creation and content and the arts in general, and even still I am. On the side, I make music. I've got a synth collection. I am on the board of the California Department of Education, helping kids create new pathways. You don't have to go to college to become a podcast producer, right? There's all these great trade skills now that you can learn and really raise yourself up from whatever life you were born into. So yeah, that's pretty much my origin story. Grew up outside New York City. Always knew that I was meant for California. It was too cold for me. So right after college, moved to Cali and never really looked back, to be honest.
What was it like working in Hollywood? Did you work with actors, musicians, both of them? Influencers?
Yeah, I worked with everybody. So I'll give you the quick story. So I was working at an agency called Creative Artists Agency, which at the time was world's largest talent agency. And I actually started in the foundation. I was helping to build charities for clients, or helping connect clients to legitimate charities and causes that they cared about. But candidly had really read this book, and this was pre-Entourage days. I'd read this book called The Mailroom, and just was man, I know I want to be in Hollywood. It's very entrepreneurial. I am an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter how old I am. It doesn't matter how experienced I am. My future is whatever I create out of it. And that kind of led me to, either lawyer, manager, or agent. Actually was going to go to law school. And then after editing about 50 Spider-Man contracts, where I changed Spider-Man 1 to Spider-Man 2, I was this is not for me, and ended up going agency side. And then there I was the youngest agent ever to be promoted. Did my due diligence, in the mailroom, delivering packages to homes, at 3:00 in the morning. It was really one of those industries where you kind of work your way up from the bottom. Paid minimum wage until I think I was about 27 years old. But long story short, just kind of saw an opportunity. I went to one of the partners with one of my colleagues and said, hey, we think there's an opportunity here that, the agency isn't focused on, which was Madison Avenue. It was all the big brands. And it wasn't just about doing endorsement deals. It was about, how do we take, all of these massive companies with massive budgets and massive footprints and really help them start to harness the power of Hollywood from a marketing perspective. And so, you name it, I probably worked with them from like big auto to movie studios to consumer products to fast food restaurants. Pretty much every single one I had some interaction with over the 10 years that I was there. And then at that point, my team had been very successful. Digital was emerging. And then I started to work with folks like Facebook in the early days to literally bring celebrities onto the platform, or the founder of Twitter became our client. And there were actually, funny enough, a lot of these kind of newer social platforms emerging that don't even exist today. And so at that point, I started to become a bridge, not just between Hollywood and Madison Avenue, but also Hollywood and Silicon Valley. And so we basically merged with what was then the M&A team to create what was called client strategy. And so my focus was working with like the 1% of Hollywood. So my main clients were, SP Projects, which was like Justin Bieber, Martin Garrix, Ariana Grande, now BTS. Worked really closely with Ashton Kutcher as he was starting to shift from being like a celebrity to like a tech entrepreneur. So, did some really cool stuff with him and Intel and folks up north. And then what kind of happened was tech really saw the opportunity, I think, for mass adoption. And that goes back to kind of what I was talking about with Facebook. And so I started working with Google to actually build and incubate next gen media companies that would effectively live on, social channels where folks like us are more accustomed to than, traditional television, and started, really kind of launching Google back to media companies. And then, I was there for about 10 years. I really enjoyed it, but I think as a marketer, just always knew like the right home for a marketer is either, brand side where you control the brand and the budget, or media side where you control the eyeballs. And so I went to NBC Universal to build their in-house marketing agency, which was super exciting. World's largest media company at the time, and within about 12 months, grew a team from like 3 to 60 people, and we were doing the largest marketing campaigns in company history. So like a lot of them were north of 150 million dollars, and these were I would say primarily like auto brands, big tech companies, big movie studios. But my kind of claim to fame and what I got most excited about was did a program with Microsoft that was pretty massive. And my in-house team at a media company's campaign outperformed their massive creative agency that's won God knows how many Cannes Lions and awards. And so that was pretty exciting, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so you then make the jump into Web3. Can you tell us a bit more about what made you want to come over to our side? And let's go with that one first.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll take a step back. So I'm at NBCU, and I realized like audiences are shifting, platforms are changing, ad dollars are moving, and they're heading towards places like Google and Meta, right? And so at that point, I leave NBCU after my 3-year contract is up, and I go to be the CMO of one of these next gen media companies that I helped incubate with Google. And then because I'd been building ad products for some time, really got there and started to build kind of really innovative non-traditional ad products. And one of the brands that I started doing that for was Amazon. And these were, again, like the largest partnerships in company history. And so what ended up happening was Amazon actually invested in us, and then about 2 weeks later poached me and brought me into headquarters to build, in a sense, what's considered to be kind of like a next gen marketing practice. So I was doing everything from podcasts to integrations into things like Netflix and Hulu, which fun fact, I was the first person ever to put brands on Netflix, and really just starting to do much more kind of, let's call it, experimental stuff. But my whole career had really kind of been ahead of the curve. I mean, I was deep into kind of digital and social when it was first emerging, then AR, then VR, and then when I went to Amazon, I was really focused on like AI, machine learning, autonomous vehicles, all of this stuff. So I've always been, I think, a little bit attracted to like emerging tech and emerging industries. I'm also a VC. I've invested in probably north of like 50 Web2 direct to consumer businesses, and now also some Web3 businesses. And so anyways, what happens is I'm at Amazon, and COVID hits, and I loved working at Amazon. I really did. I mean, I sat under like a $6 billion budget, so the resources were incredible. But kind of said to myself, I think coming out of COVID, a lot of industries and businesses are going to get fairly hit hard. And that has happened 100%. And so at that point, I started calling, all my Silicon Valley friends. So I talked to folks at places like Andreessen Horowitz, and just said, where are you guys investing today? Where are you investing tomorrow? Because one thing I've learned in my career is when you go into kind of high growth, early stage industries, you're entering a growth industry where there's always going to be more opportunity and more budget, versus a lot of traditional industries like media are now constantly consolidating and merging, right? And so they all the VCs that I spoke to were pretty much investing in the same four industries. And then during COVID, candidly, had a baby, was under a lot of stress, kind of working from home, started taking mental health walks every day. Was really interested candidly in Ethereum before I was interested in Bitcoin. And so every day for, 2 hours, I would just listen to crypto podcasts. And I definitely got the bug. I mean, it started with Ethereum, and then, obviously as someone that's, pretty intellectually curious, I wanted to dive deeper. So then I got interested in, layer twos, and then I got interested in alt ones, and then I got interested in oracles and nodes and, all of that stuff. And really kind of got the bug. And so, as I'm leaving Amazon, I'm like, I think I want to go into crypto. I haven't worked in crypto before, but I have worked in a lot of emerging industries and non-traditional fields. And so I started talking to a lot of really big infrastructure companies. Like I interviewed at, Chainlink, I interviewed with Polygon, Arbitrum, a lot of these big companies. And part of that was that, as someone, again, that's been like a VC themselves for years, when you're entering emerging industries, like typically the thing that's going to be the most stable is the lower layers, AKA like infrastructure. And so went to Arbitrum to be the first CMO there. And it was great because I think, for me, being the CMO of an entire ecosystem is incredible because one, you're building, hundreds of relationships, two, you're also getting exposed to like all these sectors within the industry. So, I'm working in DeFi, gaming, NFTs, all these areas. And so for me, it was also just a fun way to start to understand even more about crypto, start to maybe identify like verticals or areas that I'm, very passionate about. And so I was there, and then I went to a multi-chain decentralized aggregator because candidly, I did get the DeFi bug. I was really excited by it. So went there and, started working with, again, more blockchains like, Solana and BNB chain and folks like that. And then truth be told, like I really missed, and I was the first CMO at that company as well. And then truth be told, I really missed being the CMO of an entire ecosystem. Like, and the best way to put it is, when you're at a blockchain or for us, a blockchain network, you have just so much to play with. It's like, you have hundreds of partners that you can do partner marketing with. I would say, again, the caliber of developer talent tends to be, pretty strong, and you tend to have even larger developer teams. A lot of times you have, again, significant grant dollars to leverage to drive new partners, to amplify community and things like that. But I think like in my entire career, looking at my role at CAA or my role at NBCU or even my role at Amazon, I always had like a ton of toys in the toy box to play with. And so I think for me, being at an individual DApp versus a chain, with hundreds of DApps just wasn't as exciting or fulfilling for me. And so I'm back chain side. I had candidly about 50 offers in about 2 weeks, which I think is a testament to just the lack of marketing talent in this industry. But with Skale, candidly, I'd already been advising Skale along with a number of other businesses. Just really liked Jack and Stan, really liked their vision. Like the fact that they had already weathered, some bear market conditions, and just for the most part, like really aligned with them on everything. And candidly, I'm now probably about a month and a half in, and I've never been happier. I mean, this is one of the best jobs I've ever had in my career. I think, they've upheld their side of the deal, which isn't always the case in this industry. Everything we agreed on has come to fruition. And so even right now, I'm starting to, build out an organization, build out foundational stuff. And then I would say pretty soon we're going to start to turn on some fire hoses. But the fun thing is, I mean, we're already seeing, even just signal wise, like incredible growth. I'm hearing across the board, our awareness is up. We just passed 500 million transactions. I put a tweet out today, like I used to get, one inbound, project looking for a grant once a week. Now I'm getting about 14 a week. So everything is slowly accelerating in the right direction, and it's been awesome. Yeah.
Okay, so I do want to talk about Scale, but let's take a step back. Arbitrum is, because you were at Arbitrum for quite some time, and you said that's where you got to get exposed to everything. So Arbitrum is the #1 layer 2 by far. I mean, by total value locked, by total daily transactions, by total volume, daily volume. What are your thoughts on Arbitrum as the layer 2 leader? Do you think they're gonna maintain that gap? What were your experiences like working there? And then thirdly, what were the sectors? Because you said that because you got exposed to so much working at Arbitrum, what were the sectors that excited you the most while you were there, other than DeFi? You mentioned DeFi.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, listen, I'll take a step back. Like I really liked the team over there. I mean, the developers were wonderful, talented folks. I worked pretty closely with the BD team who, shout out to Size, Chad, Barat, Luke, Peter. I mean, they're still very good friends of mine. I talk to them pretty frequently, but I think, overall, it's an interesting thing when I look at all these chains, because there's so many chains coming out, right? In my soul, I personally believe that they should pivot to being a purpose-built blockchain for DeFi, right? I think they've kind of won DeFi. Even for me, now that I'm at Scale, we did just launch kind of a DeFi initiative, but I'm not trying to beat Arbitrum. It's similar to when I helped launch Microsoft Bing back in the day. We weren't trying to beat Google search. We were just trying to take away, 1% market share, which ends up being a very meaningful number. I think for us, what we're doing with DeFi is really more focusing on things that improve user experience with where we're, already succeeding, like in gaming, like, making sure that there's liquidity to trade in-game assets, or, if a project wants to launch a token natively on Scale, they can do that, right? So for me here, it's really much more about user experience, where I think at Arbitrum, it was very much about, driving that TVL up. I do think, again, like they've been extremely successful in DeFi. I think that'll continue, because obviously with all of that TVL there, if you're launching a DeFi project, like that's an enormous opportunity to be able to tap into. My concern, I think, and this isn't even like Arbitrum focused, but like I'm just going to go more DeFi focus, is I love DeFi. Like it's probably my favorite sector. I'm a day trader and a pretty decent one. I just don't know.
I would argue that it's the only sector of crypto that has found product market fit.
Product market fit with crypto natives, right? And that's, I think, the most important thing to remember, is that like only 5% of the population, I'm gonna take these off. Only about 5% of the population is
now, huh?
Yeah, exactly. I'm a serious guy now. Only about 5% of the population is already on chain, right? And again, like going back to even my Amazon days, like I helped launch numerous products and services. And obviously we had enormous budgets, but you're always going through that kind of mass adoption bell curve, cycle. And I think what a lot of folks in this industry don't understand is like what it takes to drive mass adoption, which is part of why I went to Scale. Like the fact that we're gas free, you can go play a game on the Epic Game Store, not even know there's blockchain in the background. And while you're playing that game, it's driving significant amounts of transactions on Scale, right? I look at that and I go, that is the type of thing that can drive mass adoption, right? The invisible blockchain, like it's already here. My concern with some of these like purpose-built DeFi chains is I think 100% they've found product market fit in the 5%. The question becomes, as that 5% goes to 100%, will there still be that same level of product market fit? And my concern is I don't think so. I think, again, like, account abstraction, UI changes, all of that stuff, it may help in the future, but a lot of these DeFi products, I don't think are very accessible to everyday people, right? And you have to remember, like the everyday person maybe has a 401k account. Even most people I know, don't even have a traditional investment account, right? Or if they do, it's managed by someone else. And so, again, like I think again, it attracts very tech sophisticated folks. I think it attracts folks that maybe have a higher risk profile, but the average everyday person is not aligned with kind of that crypto native, persona or framework, right? So that's something I think about. And then if you were to say to me, well, then what does DeFi look like from a mass perspective? I think we're already seeing it. I think, when you look at like what BlackRock's doing with the Biddle fund, or, I know I can't really talk about it, but like I have a pretty good sense of like what BlackRock's building behind the scenes right now. I think what we're going to see is a lot of these Web2 companies, like for example, my buddy's the head of marketing for Fidelity Crypto. They're going to right now tap into what's here, right? They're going to probably, I think BlackRock, for example, is building on Arbitrum or partnering with Arbitrum. And I put a thread out about this, like long term, and I've worked with, Chase, Citi, Amex, I've worked with all these brands. They're going to all have their own blockchains, right? And so long story short, like the liquidity in crypto right now obviously lives on, let's call it like native chains. But long term, I think that those types of companies, because they've been around for many years, they're trusted by institutions, they're recognizable names to consumers, they may start to become more of the homes for this DeFi activity. And then any TVL that they are quote unquote like bringing onto these chains or managing, they're going to pull it right back onto their own chains. And so I do think like DeFi is going to evolve and change pretty significantly over the next 10 years. One of the questions I get a lot is like, what do you think that they're going to do? And, it depends, but like, I have a feeling that most of them will probably have both alt1s and L2s. I think alt1s because they want to have centralized control, right? Like they don't want to give up that control. And then from an L2 standpoint, it wouldn't surprise me to see folks like BlackRock building L2s on Ethereum to tap into that existing liquidity or to signal that they're Ethereum native. So I think like that's my broader concern with purpose-built DeFi. I think like the areas that I think are a little more interesting from a mass adoption.
Andrew, let me interrupt you there for a second before we move on to other areas. So your thesis is that BlackRock, Fidelity, which by the way, Fidelity's, from what I understand, been mining Bitcoin since 2014. Your thesis is that the Fidelities and the BlackRocks and all these big companies will churn up their own layer ones, highly centralized, I'm assuming layer ones, where they maintain control. They control the liquidity. The liquidity is not going to be necessarily migrating from an Ethereum layer one or a Solana layer one to a Fidelity layer one, but it might pseudo migrate through an L2. Or
the way I look at it is like the liquidity that's currently on chains, right? Across chains, that's the 5%, right? So what we're talking about now is that 95% that's not here yet, right? And so again, fast forward, I've seen so many tech industries evolve and change that I kind of have in my head a little bit of an understanding of how this stuff works. But I think like, again, right now, the opportunity for them is what's already here, right? But obviously the long-term opportunity for them is the 95%, right? And so it would not surprise me that in the future, you're going to a Fidelity crypto site, or you're going to, again, great example, like JP Morgan Chase has Marcus, which is like a consumer-facing product, right? It wouldn't surprise me if they start to build front ends that are very, very consumer friendly, that are leveraging their trusted brands and names that people have, known for 50 years. And then people are onboarding through those sites, and that liquidity is going on to their chains, right? And the reason I assume alt ones is because, again, like, I think part of why we've had such issue getting, regulation passed, does have to do with TradFi, and does have to do with the power of the almighty dollar. And so, they currently run very controlled businesses. Why would they want to sacrifice that control? That doesn't make any sense, right? And so I think that's what makes sense. And then, people always say to me like, well, no L2s. Again, these are companies that have unlimited resources. These are companies that can afford the best talent in the world. I would assume they're going to be doing all different types of things. So for me, again, knowing that we're in like the experimentation phase, or the we used to call them tech setters, like tech setter phase, it wouldn't surprise me to find out that these companies behind the scenes are building alt ones, L2s on Ethereum, maybe even experimenting with layer threes on their own L2s. But again, the thought of them, building something on top of someone else where they don't have control, I don't see it happening. And I'll give you a great example, like with Amazon. So I loved working at Amazon, but like one of the things that Jeff really kind of hammered into all of us was like, you never want dependencies. And I'll give you a story that really paints this picture. So when I went to that media company that was built on social, we were building audiences on top of Facebook and Snapchat and TikTok and all that, right? But we didn't own those audiences because we were built on top of other people's platforms, right? And so what started happening with Facebook is they started charging for rent. They were like, hey, you have 100 million people that you're reaching a month through your own channel on Facebook. Well, guess what? If you want to reach them now, you've got to pay to do it. And a lot of people that worked in digital and social probably remember those days. And so now, my revenue was being cut because I now had to pay for what I used to get for free, right? And so I think Jeff's mentality at Amazon and in marketing, it's really about things like agencies was, you never want to be beholden to other people, right? Because you lose control, you lose leverage, all of these things, right? And so if you're a company, like a BlackRock or Fidelity or a large bank, and you have the resources, why would you build on top of someone else where they could hypothetically say to you, well, now you're going to pay a monthly fee of $1 million, or now you're not, right? So in my mind, there's 100% no doubt in my mind that they're already building their own things. It's just a question of like, when do those launch and why? And they might say, well, it doesn't actually make sense to launch these things until we're at the 10% adoption phase or 15% or whatever it is. And I think that they probably know that a lot of the natives, that 5% that are here today, are not going to want to use those products and are not going to touch those products. But the 95% that's not here, like case in point, let's use my mother. Like if I sent my mother this random website with a .io or a .xyz, and basically said, hey, put $50,000 into this investment account, you think she's going to do that faster than she's going to go to fidelity.com and do it there? No way. So yeah, that's my POV.
Okay, so let's dive into other sectors that you think will. So, in my opinion, I think gaming it's getting close. It's not there yet, but it's getting close. And I think that with gaming, what excites me the most is when we do finally get a great game or a set of great games that also support players owning their own assets, owning their own achievements, having history of time spent dated back on the blockchain. Very exciting to me as someone that played a lot of games growing up, particularly played a lot of World of Warcraft later on. Man, if that thing had been built using blockchain technology, leveraging NFTs, I think that it's difficult, and that's a conversation in its own. It's going to be difficult to get it right because you want to walk the line between pay to play and also allowing people to potentially make a living off of playing, because they already are. There are already black markets for buying and selling accounts, buying and selling gold. Why not capture some of that value? But you also don't want to, as a gamer, you don't want to spend, let's say, 100 days played getting good at a particular class race combo and accruing all these items just to have someone who's a millionaire come in and buy all those items in a day and come and beat you, right? So there needs to be a balance. But anyway, I think gaming is very bullish. It's going to get there eventually. I think DePIN, decentralized physical infrastructure, is very interesting to me, although I don't understand it as well as gaming. I think Helium's did a good job of at least attempting to build this cellular network. They have a little bit of help from T-Mobile, but yeah, what do you think between?
I mean, listen, I'm happy to talk about DePIN after, because I did work in IoT, Internet of Things, which is really the exact same thing as DePIN. There's kind of three sectors that I remain very bullish on, and you're now going to understand part of why I chose to go to Skale out of those 50 companies. So the three sectors that I'm most focused on personally are gaming, AI, and social. And I'll give you kind of a macro, and then I'll kind of go through each one. So when we talk about mass adoption, there are a couple different ways that it can occur, right? And so let's take where crypto is today. In my opinion, and just to give you the background as to like where my thinking comes from. So I've worked with most of the major gaming studios. I've worked with most of the casual gaming studios, like King, who did Candy Crush. I've worked in cloud gaming at Amazon. I've worked with Amazon Game Studios. So I've worked in gaming. I even used to represent Will Wright, who created The Sims 20 years ago. I was on his team at CAA. So I've been in gaming for a very long time. And I do think, to your point, you're 100% right. I think if there is one, hit game, breakout game, that could bring in millions and millions of new users, 100%, right? And I'll give you the example of like why Scale and why gaming on Scale. So very, very simple. Like, because of the gas-free architecture that we built and this unlimited kind of scalability model, which I can kind of get into if you're interested. What that means is someone can build a game on Scale. And right now and today, there could be 1,000 daily active users. And then that moment happens, a Twitch streamer discovers it, whatever. And the next thing you know, there's 20 million players. And all of a sudden, Scale can actually handle that because it's built for high throughput, right? And all three of those are high throughput applications, right? So I do think that could happen. But I also think there's different ways it could happen. So I'll use an example, like take like a Stardew Valley, right? You could have an indie game, because most of the big studios are not in blockchain right now, which I'll talk about. You could have an indie game that just becomes a breakaway hit. It's on the Epic Game Store. It just automatically starts to become a word of mouth sensation. And the next thing you know, there's 20 million people playing that game, right? That could happen. The other thing that could happen is I live in LA where all the big game studios are. I have a lot of friends at the studios. One of my best friends works for PlayStation headquarters. And we talk about this stuff a lot. And I think right now, because of the lack of regulation clarity in the US, and a lot of these folks are here in Los Angeles, they're not going to start to dip their toes into crypto and blockchain because they're not going to put publicly traded companies at risk. They're just not, right? And so what I'm already seeing is I am seeing developers like, Paul over at Wildcard is a good example, or the guys over at Big Time. I'm seeing developers that are coming from, the Epics and Activisions of the world, doing this as either a side hustle or starting their own business and launching it. But again, they're innovators, and they're willing to take on some of that risk. I think, depending on kind of how election season goes, if we end up getting regulation clarity, it would not surprise me to all of a sudden see all the big gaming companies enter crypto, right? And obviously, if you're, Activision or Epic, you're going to have an incredible game that you put millions of dollars against, right? You're going to have a marketing budget that could be, 9 figures, right? So again, I think, an indie breakout game, because that's really what we have. Like on Scale, for example, we don't have just random guys in their basement. What we have is a lot of indie studios around the world that are already creating Web 2 games that are now dipping their toes into Web3, right? So one of those could just break out, but at the same time, we could get regulation clarity, and then the behemoths come in, and all of a sudden it just happens, right? Same thing I talk about in Web2. Like, one thing that could happen, in my opinion, is we get regulation clarity. Let's go back to my working at Amazon. I can't share numbers publicly, but there are a lot of Prime members in the US, right? If all of a sudden they want to integrate blockchain into the Prime membership program, and again, if you look at Scale, there's no transactions, there's no gas fees, you don't even realize it's there. They could instantly onboard millions and millions and millions of Americans, like a pretty substantial percentage of the population, right? So that could happen. Regulation, I think, is like a little bit of the question mark.
Okay, so the no gas fee structure, can you explain really quickly how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's pretty simple. I mean, the way it works is developers on Scale are renting block space, right? And there's kind of 2 ways that this happens, and I'll kind of walk you through it. So we have what's called hub chains, because we're a modular app chain network. We have multiple chains. We have what are called hub chains, right? So we have one chain.
Can you explain? I love on my platform to have guests explain things in layman's terms, because like you and I discussed, your mom or my mom should be able to understand what problems to solve. So what is modular? What do you, when you say it's modular, what do you mean?
Okay. Yeah. So I think the first thing to call out is, Scale is sorry, I forgot, what was the question we're talking about?
Yeah, sure. So we've talked a lot about the gasless transactions.
Gasless.
And I think it would be important to understand how that actually works, because I think most people, when they think of a layer 1 or a layer 2, they think, okay, I'm going to need at least a couple cents for a layer 2 transaction, even if it's on Base or BSC.
I got it. Okay, cool. Yeah, so 100%, I can explain that. So Scale is a modular blockchain network, right? And I'll kind of try to explain the easiest way to think about it. So when you hear the notion of like a layer two, they're built on top of Ethereum, right? And they're inheriting Ethereum's security, they're inheriting Ethereum's decentralization. And what they're doing is by creating that layer on top, they're creating scalability, right? The trilemma. You can't have all three on the blockchain. The problem, and I saw this myself again when I was CMO of Arbitrum, is we're still very, very early, right? Like again, 5% of the population. And so you have to think about like what the transaction volume looks like at 100%, right? And I think it's pretty simple. Anytime we're in a bull market, what you see is you can see Ethereum gas fees, go from anywhere from, $2 on a transaction up to, I think I had a transaction where my gas fee was like $1,000. It was crazy, right?
Dude, last bull market,
Yeah.
the gas fees were out of control.
Out of control.
If you weren't doing, honestly, if you weren't doing over a $500-$600 transaction, you might as well just not transact on Ethereum. It was
pretty
that
much
bad.
Yeah, pretty much. And so I think, candidly, when that happened, what I did was I bridged all my assets to layer twos and alt ones, right? Because I was like, okay, when Ethereum gas surges, like I don't want those fees on my trades, right? I may still have to pay some fees to kind of, cash out in the end, but like, you don't want to lose your entire gain on the back of a gas fee, right? And so I start trading on layer twos and trading on alt ones. And I think the problem though is what people haven't realized is like, even though the gas fees can be significantly less on a layer two than they are on Ethereum, it still is going to go up, right? And so the example I could give you is like when I was making a transaction on a layer two, it might have been like 1 cent. But then fast forward, gas fees start surging. It might still be like $1.25 or $1.50. And for a lot of people in a lot of parts of the world, like that's not nothing, right? And those numbers start to add up, right? And so I think that's also part of why now you're seeing layer threes. And I know it's a meme, but like I really do mean this. It's like we're gonna see layer fours, we're gonna see layer fives. It's just gonna happen out of necessity. I think what's gonna eventually happen again is more of this stuff will be invisible, and you won't realize what's happening underneath the hood of the car, right? And the analogy that I like to give is like, if you open up 2 car hoods in like 5-10 years, and one's a Skale car and one's a layer 2 car, right? You're going to open the Skale engine, and it's going to look beautiful and clean, and it's going to be purring, right? You're going to open up the layer 2 car, and it's going to look like a Frankenstein mess. It's going to have the same probably functionality and ability of Skale, but they had to build new things, bring in third-party partners, all this stuff in order to do it. And so this is another reason I went to Skale. I think the way we chose to build Skale from the beginning is what made sense for the long term. It really is what makes sense for scalability. And that's why, for example, and I'll kind of walk you through the model. So in modular, instead of going vertical, you're going, effectively horizontal, right? We're continuing to deploy new additional chains that are all tapping into what's basically considered the Skale network, which is a node network. And the difference with our, nodes versus others is we have what are called super nodes. And so each super node is actually a cluster of 8 nodes, right? And so what you have, I'll try to like map this out with my hands, is you've got, all these chains, right? And then underneath them, you've got all these super nodes with 8 nodes, and those nodes are connecting into all these chains, right? And then what'll happen is, one chain may not require as much, and another chain might surge, and then dynamically those nodes just start shifting over where needed, right? So it's very dynamic. But typically what would happen is, I'll go back to the game analogy. I'm building a game, and I may want to start on a hub chain, right? So we have a hub chain for gaming, we have a hub chain for AI, we have a hub chain for DeFi, we have a hub chain for, like art, NFTs, content, things like that. But and all the chains are fairly similar. There's just tiny differences on them that are basically specifically meant to help with the use case, right? Like, so the gaming chain, like there's specific things you want for gaming, like incredibly fast TPS, right? You don't want a game to crash, or you don't want the graphics to lag. So what would typically happen is you would launch, I'll just use that example, you would launch on the gaming hub chain where there's many other games on there, right? We have over 50 plus gas-free games, right? And what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to rent block space on that chain, right? So all 50 of those games are now renting that block space. And by renting that block space and paying that in advance, they're effectively offsetting gas fees, right? And as a result, the user then pays no gas fees, right? It's basically the developer saying, we're going to cover it in advance. And by doing that, we're going to hopefully drive better user adoption. And that's what we've seen. I mean, we're consistently top 5 most daily active users across all chains. we're the #1 gaming chain in terms of daily active users. Like, funny enough, there's a study that I think it was, Ronan commissioned it. And there's nothing I love more as a marketer than when like a competitor pays for something that then helps you. But like, what they basically came out with was, we had, I think, something north of like 230,000, active GameFi wallets. Ronin was 105,000, and it went all the way down to Arbitrum, who only has like 1,600 active GameFi wallets, right? And so a lot of people ask me, they're like, well, where are they coming from? And I've kind of like scratched my head a little bit, but I'll tell you my hypothesis. Like, I do think we've had an awareness issue, which is part of why I'm here. But you're like, well, how do you have the most active gaming community but an awareness issue on the timeline? And what I think it is we're bringing in normies. We're bringing in like Web 2 gamers. And most people would say, well, no, that's not possible. Web 2 gamers hate crypto. Well, yeah, they do when they're aware of it. But like, I'll give you an example. Like, we have 4 games, all I think are pretty solid games, that are all in the Epic Game Store, right? So if you're a traditional gamer, like, I'll walk you through that journey. Like, I'm watching Twitch. I see my favorite player playing this cool game. They say it's available on the Epic Game Store. I then go to the Epic Games launcher on my PC. I download the game. I start playing it. They don't even realize that the blockchain's there, right? So I'll give you an example, like Haven's Compass, Fussy Fox, World of Dipians, Stray Shots coming out pretty soon on Epic. But all of these games, you can go on the Epic Game Store, play them just like you would any other game. And because there's no gas fees, all those transactions are processing in the back end while the game's being played. So you wouldn't even know that there's blockchain involved, right? And then fast forward, let's say traditional gamers become more friendly towards crypto and NFTs and blockchain. Well, then those games can start to say, hey, come to my website, connect your wallet. You can now start to collect these in-game items. Those items are going to have value. You can trade those. Maybe some of these games will create their own marketplaces for those items. Like maybe Scale will create one, wink, wink. But I think at the end of the day, like, that's what's happening. And then what'll happen from there is, I've launched my game on that hub chain. I've rented block space. Well, now I need a lot more block space because holy crap, 20 million people are playing my game. Well, then all we do is we just quickly shift you over to your own chain. So you went from a shared chain model to an individual chain model. And one of the things like Jack always says to me, which is true, is like, you look at kind of the narratives of like Arbitrum's, layer 3 orbit chains, or you look at like Optimism super chains. We've been doing this since day one. I mean, this has been our model since day one, right? And so for developers, if they want to, start a little more conservatively, they can share block space with other, like-minded companies, whether it's gaming, AI, social, DeFi. But if they are bullish, or if they already have massive user numbers, they can just have their own entire chain instantly. And even that migration process is very, very simple and very, very fast. But I do think, again, because they are paying for that block space in advance, that's also just removing a friction point and allowing for things like what I talked through with Epic to actually occur, right? Same thing with AI projects. I mean, you can, some of these AI projects, there are apps that you can, download and interact with, and they're doing things, similar to a ChatGPT, or maybe they're launching custom AI agents. And again, you don't even realize the blockchain is there,
So one of the things I always say is that the future of Web3 mass adoption is when individuals can interface with Web3 the way they do with Web2, without recognizing what's happening in the background. Do you think that with layer 2s, and I do want to get to the AI sector, by the way,
yeah.
I haven't forgotten about that. Do you think that with L2s and L3s and L4s and L5s, do you think siloed users and siloed liquidity? I know we have cross-chain bridges like Jumper, but do you think siloed users and siloed liquidity is going to become a problem? You have layer 1s like Solana saying that, hey, we're good enough, or you can just have everything on layer 1. I don't know if I completely agree with that or believe it, but would love to know your thoughts on kind of the future of having so many layers on top of each other.
I'm bearish.
Yeah, why?
I just, it's funny. Like, I do believe, the future has and always will be multi-chain. Like, it was a given, right? And again, you have to remember how early we are. And like, it's funny because when I talk to a lot of like natives, they think we're not early. They're like, oh, we were early 5 years ago. I'm telling you right now, as someone that worked in VR, AR, machine learning, autonomous vehicles, like I've seen the adoption life cycles, and I've seen how long it actually takes for these things to reach mass adoption. in my opinion, we are still very, very early, like extremely early. I think most projects are still in quadrant 1 and maybe at the beginning of quadrant 2. And mass adoption really happens at the end of quadrant 3. I think a lot of these chains will not exist by then. I think we'll also see tons and tons of new chains. Again, with regulation clarity, it would not surprise me to see big tech companies creating and launching their own chains. So long story short, I think, yes, I think fragmented liquidity is a bit of an issue. I think fragmented user bases is even more of an issue. I'll give you a great example. So we have a lot of games, that come to me and they basically say, we launched on this other chain because of a grant, right? We needed the money to get off the ground. Maybe they're not based in the US where it's easy to kind of bring in VC liquidity or VC investments. And so the grant was very important for them. And so they launched their game and, they basically deploy their grant dollars. Maybe they're doing incentive campaigns or whatever, and they're not able to build sticky user bases, right? And I think the problem is what's happening is, they're getting farmed, right? Which, by the way, that's fine. That's part of crypto. But once they're farmed and those incentives are gone, those users aren't coming back, right? And maybe the players of that game weren't even really gamers to begin with. Maybe it was just like, well, if I reach level 25 in this game, my NFT value will go up 4,000%. And it's about that than it is playing a fun game, right? And so what I've seen over and over now across multiple games is games that are built on other chains will then build on us. Cause they always ask me, they're like, should we shut it down on the other chain? And I was like, why? Like, there's no, like, again, I'm thinking of your business as if I'm, an employee there, why shut it down on that chain? If you're able to build a user base on multiple chains, that's great for your business. It's great for your game. Right. But what we've seen is a lot of these games will come to scale, they'll launch. And then because we have that real user base of real gamers that I genuinely think are Web2 gamers, they'll very, very quickly see actual players and actual return players, especially if they've built an actual fun and good game, which some of them have, right? The other thing that happens, which is really interesting to me, is folks that played the game on another chain because they liked the game, right? Like an actual gamer, they'll end up moving over to Scale. And it makes total sense because they're like, I can play the same game. There's faster TPS. There's 99.9% uptime. And I'll give you a great story about that. And I don't pay for any of the transactions anymore, right? And I'll give you an example. Like when I worked at the layer 2, I was playing, 30 games a day because we had a pretty big gaming ecosystem. I was paying per transaction, 1, 2, 3, 5 cents at a time. Gas fees start going up. I'm paying $1 per transaction. Each game, I'm now paying like close to $100 a month times 30 games, right? Those better be the best games ever, or those in-game items better, skyrocket in the future, because like that does not make any sense, right? And so if you're the gaming company, one, what you're building is increasingly frustrated users with increasingly higher levels of expectation, right? And then as the gaming company, in my opinion, you're not actually building a sticky user base. You're continuously building a speculative user base that may not even be there because they like the games. And that's a problem. Again, if you're thinking long-term growth, sustainability, mass adoption, like that's not a good thing, right? And then going back to what I was talking about with uptime, so even one of the things that I've seen, because we are a high throughput modular chain network, a lot of these chains cannot handle that scalability, right? And so I won't name names, but I remember seeing there was a gaming tournament for a game that I think is quite good actually, and it was on an Alt1. And all of a sudden, the amount of players surge, transactions surge because they're doing this big gaming tournament, and the chain crashed. And there's no doubt in my mind that what it was that the chain could not handle the throughput, right? Whereas at Scale, if that tournament had been played on one of our hub chains, it could have handled it. And then they might have turned around and said, "Oh man, we need more space." And then within a couple of days, we just launched their own chain. But that never becomes an issue. And so my concern again around some of these chains is they want to drive mass adoption against their game. But then when mass adoption occurs, your game crashes, right? That's not how you onboard the masses,
I want to talk about AI.
Sure.
What specifically about, because I've seen a lot of these DPIN projects. I think DPIN and AI kind of tie into each other. DPIN projects that are allowing folks with powerful GPUs to allocate that GPU power to let's call it a pool. And then that pool of GPU power is used to power things like Chat GPT, something like a Chat GPT, right?
Sure.
Those GPU those GPU owners are then given tokens in proportion to how much of their GPU power they're allocating to the pool. What are your thoughts about that specifically, and what are your thoughts about the broader AI sector as it pertains to DePIN and crypto?
So basically, there's kind of a couple different models I've seen. So you have companies like IO, where what they're doing is they're saying, okay, well, there are GPUs in various places. Like there
Actually,
may be
sorry, Andrew, you made me think. Do you want to do it over again?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Yep.
that way it's we can cut it out and it sounds better.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I think there's kind of like two areas of AI, or I should say actually three areas of AI that I think are really interesting. So one is kind of going back to your point, like the notion of GPUs, right? So anyone that doesn't know, AI is extremely GPU intensive, right? And again, you have to think about in the future, if you have again, every business, big and small, using AI in some capacity, that is going to be an extremely large number of GPUs needed, right? And so right now, where are folks getting those? They're getting them from AWS, they're getting them from Microsoft Azure, they're getting them from Google Cloud, they're getting them from Salesforce, folks like that, right? But again, we live in a supply-demand economy. And so what's going to happen is we're going to see a surge in GPU needs. And then the question becomes, can the supply continue to pace along with demand? And I don't think it can. And so what'll happen is, the price of GPUs will go up. And so for years, just because I used to work in that space, there's been a lot of folks looking for kind of alternative solutions to this, or alternative, GPU sources. And so, I've seen some of this now, to your point, in the DePIN sector, and I'm excited about it. Like, I'd have to dig in on projects to really understand, like, is their vision a reality? Can they actually execute it? Or is this just all hypothetical? But like, there's a couple models that I've seen. One is, yes, you have the Amazon data centers of the world, but also all around the world, there's smaller, GPU farms, right? So maybe there's a small GPU farm in Saudi Arabia. Maybe there's a small GPU farm in Portugal, right? So you're seeing projects where what they're doing is they're taking these decentralized GPU networks and they're trying to connect them together, right? And they're trying to basically say, we can aggregate all these GPUs and create our own Microsoft Azure, or our own AWS, and maybe there's a different financial model or whatever it is. The other model that I've seen, kind of going back to what you're saying, is like, well, where else are there GPUs, right? So the gaming industry is massive, right? As someone that used to work in gaming, most gaming PCs are extremely GPU intensive, right? And the average person is not playing games on their PC 24/7, right? And so there are projects that I've seen, and I think this is smart too, where they're saying, well, there's a lot of unused GPUs out there, right? How do we create a Airbnb type model where all of those GPUs can effectively be rented out when they're not being used, right? I like that model. I think it's super smart. So I think projects that are approaching AI from like a decentralized GPU model or smart. I actually talked about this, I'm not even kidding you, like a year ago, before anyone was even paying attention to it. And I was like, you think AI is going to be the biggest narrative? Well, here's the narrative you're not paying attention to, because it's directly impacted by AI. Right. The second area of AI that I'm really bullish on is AI agents. And the easiest way to think about this is, again, like, every business, I think, in the future will have an AI agent of sorts. And I'll give you examples, right? So let's say you travel a lot for business, and let's say you're a Marriott customer, right? What'll end up happening is you'll go onto the Marriott website and you'll say, oh, I need to go to Brussels for this conference, ECC. And then that AI agent, because of your data set, it'll know every hotel you've ever stayed in, the price points of those hotels, the years they were built, the qualities of the interiors, the colors of the rooms. And maybe, through the years, you're rating the hotels and saying, this was 5, this was 4, whatever. But that agent will effectively become your own personalized travel agent that'll say, okay, you're going to Brussels, this is the perfect hotel for you, right? Or another example is like, what's this shirt? Ruka, right? Ruka, a smaller clothing brand, right? So I buy a lot of stuff from Ruka. I think, like, if I have to think about it, I like floral prints, I like greens, I like blues. I wear like a size XL, but I like maybe like a more athletic cut. But same thing, like in the future, I will go on Ruka and I will have my own personal shopping assistant. And so instead of even going onto the website and seeing what's new or what's in the men's section, it'll just auto curate everything that I'm most likely to like and buy based off of all that data, right? So you'll see these AI agents across any businesses you can think of. I mean, you'll see them in customer service, you'll see them in, data aggregation, all of these areas. And then the third one that I like is very similar to kind of what we're seeing with OpenAI, which is just AI companies that are leveraging very, very, very large data sets, right? So there may be companies, doing things similar to ChatGPT. There may be companies, again, leveraging that data for things like medical or security or various sectors. But I think like those three areas of AI are three that I've been bullish on pre-crypto. And I think the decentralized nature of blockchain is actually great because, again, like you look at the data hacks, like I'll give you an example, like Snowflake got hacked. That is scary. Like if you don't know what Snowflake is, I mean, that's a company that has insane amounts of data. Or OpenAI recently got hacked. Like that's scary. That's scary stuff in the future. Imagine you use OpenAI for 10 years and it knows more about you than you know about yourself. And now that data is in the hands of a third party that you don't know who it is. Like that's not good, right? So I think, again, the decentralization of data, and there's some companies actually already building this kind of stuff, I think is pivotal to AI long-term from a security standpoint. I really do. Yeah.
Andrew, I am one of the folks that said early on, and you were on the space, that I don't think we're in a real bull market yet. Everyone said the bull market's here, it's here early. And I said that I don't think the numbers support it, right? The number of new retail investors coming into the market, the views on crypto content that's popular on YouTube, the number of searches for crypto related terms. I thought that this was the ETF stirring excitement, and the retail investors that are already in the market, which are a lot more than 4 years ago, trying to front run everyone else. And so with that, we didn't see the typical Bitcoin, then Ethereum, then large cap, then small caps, then shitcoins. It was like Bitcoin and then straight to meme tokens, right? It went Bitcoin and straight to shit. And the latest iteration of shitcoin has been celebrity tokens, celebrities pumping Mother or Jason Derulo, rugging his community, or Hulk Hogan or someone on his account rugging his community. So you have worked in Hollywood. You work with a lot of actors, celebrities. You put out a thread recently on celebs and crypto. I would love you to tell us a bit about that. I'm gonna go here and guess that this isn't exactly what you meant when you said celebrities and crypto. So what are your thoughts on what I suspect are potentially illegal activities happening on the celebrity end with guys like Jason Derulo shilling a token and then dumping it? And then what good can people with influence like celebrities bring our industry? Because so far it seems like in the previous cycle we had people being gifted Bored Apes and shilling the Bored Apes on shows like Jimmy Kimmel's, and we've seen what happened with those. And now it looks to me like we have meme tokens spearheaded by celebrities or celebrity teams pumping and then subsequently dumping.
Yeah, let's start here. I don't think it's going to end well for these people. There is no doubt in my mind that celebrities launching meme coins are instantly on the SEC's radar and instantly in crosshairs, right? And why? Like, I'll go back in time a little bit. So, I talked about how I was, very early in social, but like I was very early. Like, influencers didn't exist yet, and I was one of the first people to ever develop what is now considered like a modern day influencer program. And what I was doing was, I was putting celebrities like Justin Bieber, on social platforms, and they were building these massive audiences. And then I was going to brands that were used to buying traditional ad inventory, and I was saying, well, hey, my client can reach this amount of people, right? This amount, engage on a daily basis, this amount of impressions. Why can't we look at this new thing under the same lens that we look at the old thing? And some really innovative brands, like I worked with like Reebok and Conagra and folks like that, they were on board. Like, they were some of the first brands to do this stuff. And actually, fun fact, the modern day influencer model was actually created by Dr. Pepper. And the background there is, yeah, I know people never believe me when I say this, but it's true. And I'll tell you the quick story. So when I'm working with Google to launch these next gen media companies, most of them were what was called MCNs, multi-channel networks, where we were taking lots of channels and aggregating them together and building, massive reach on the back of individual channels, right? And a good buddy of mine at the time had started one of these companies called Fullscreen, but before that, he actually worked at YouTube. under this kind of creator program. And then I even worked with what was called Next New Networks, which was kind of like the early brainchild that was bought by YouTube. CEO then went to be the general manager of TikTok for the United States. Fun fact, I've almost worked at TikTok like 3 times as a result. And so anyways, so Dr. Pepper basically did this campaign with that creator, and then that kind of influenced what's now this enormous influencer industry. So drink more Dr. Pepper, influencers. But anyways, so I start working with these celebrities, and we're doing, I'm like, these are influential people that have large media channels of followers that they influence. Why can't I market from those channels, right? So I'm doing this. And this was like in the early days when a lot of celebrities, like, again, it was gray area, like with the FTC, like, you didn't have to, quote unquote, put hashtag sponsor. You didn't have to put hashtag ad. Like, that wasn't there yet, right? And what started happening, and I remember this, was not my clients, but like other celebrities were starting to get sued or starting to get like letters from the FTC basically saying like, this is, what's the term to use? This is not openly being messaged, right? Like you are messaging to your followers that you love this product or they should buy this product, but you're not being transparent to the fact that you're being incentivized to do that, right? And when that happened, we started to get some regulation clarity, and the FTC started releasing guidelines. And then at that point, when I'm working with these celebrities, I'm like, guys, we have to put, sponsored ad or whatever it is, right? But again, like, you have kind of the same thing happening right now where you have these big celebrities, and yes, maybe they're not advertising a product, maybe it's their product, right? Which is different. But again, like, there's an incentive behind it that's not being disclosed, right? And so there's no doubt in my mind that 90%, if not all of these celebrities, will end up with lawsuits in the near future. Like, no doubt in my mind, right? Because again, you have to also realize, like, who are they manipulating? They're manipulating folks that are more susceptible. They're manipulating normies that don't understand this stuff, that don't understand how it works. They don't know what a rug pull is. They don't know what market manipulation on a meme coin is, right? So they're susceptible. And like, there's no doubt in my mind that the government doesn't understand that and see that. So celebrities, like, I still talk to a lot of celebrities. I have friends that are celebrities, and they ask me about this stuff. And I'm like, do not do it. Do not launch a meme coin. I think in the future, like, once there's regulation clarity, if you're a celebrity, then you could launch a meme coin. But again, there's going to be very clear guidelines. Like, you're going to have to probably disclose something to everyone in advance. It might be like what percentage of the cap table you own. It might be a full breakdown of all the investors, things like that. But I think everyone that's doing this right now is playing with fire. I think it's a really bad idea on all sides. And I also think, again, as we're trying to bring the 95% in, if the first experience of the 95% is losing their shirt, well, that's not gonna drive mass adoption. That's not good for crypto. The argument that I've seen over and over is, oh, it's driving awareness, it's driving new users. Yeah, but if their first experience is a negative one, like, they're not going to come back. It's like when I'll give you a great example. Like, I drove a rental car for the first time, right, this weekend. I'd never driven this brand's car. I loved it. It was great. It was fun. After about 10 minutes, the trunk stopped working, and I had to pull my suitcases in and out of the back seat the whole time. I will never buy that car, ever, right? It's the same exact thing, right? You bring someone in, and that's their first experience. They're not going to come back, and you know what? They're going to tell all their friends to stay away, right? So it's not good for crypto. It's really not. However, there are things that I think celebrities could be doing. One example that I'll give you is, like, I think Armin van Buuren, actually, shout out to him, like, did a really nice job with this. But I think, again, when we think about fan clubs, I've actually worked with him, and he is awesome. He's like the nicest guy, truly, and very innovative. So I'm not surprised to see that, like, he's doing this. Like, he's very ahead of the curve, right? But I think, like, thinking about the fan club and fan engagement, like, that's something that makes sense, right? And so what he did is he created these NFTs, and they all look the same. They were designed by Fuck Render, and they're really cool. And basically, like, there were kind of, I think, different tiers of NFTs, different colors, and they all had different utility, right? So if you had the lower tier, I think it did something like it got you, early access to ticket sales. And I think it also got you, like, early access to exclusive merch. And then I think the next tier up also unlocked, like, a Discord that he was actually in and, like, engaging with people in. I think it also unlocked things like meet and greets, right? Things like that. And then I think there was, like, another tier beyond that where the utility was, like, even more. It was like, coffee with Armin or things like that. But that's a great model, because what he's doing, and then what he did was he didn't market it to crypto. He marketed it to his existing fan club. He sent out an email. to all of his fans. I subscribe. I love Armin van Buuren. And he basically said, hey guys, I'm building a fan club of the future. I'm using this innovative technology. Like, if you love me and you love my music and you want to support me, like, be a part of this, right? And I would argue, like, most of the folks that bought those NFTs didn't buy them with the intent of flipping them for a profit. They bought them because that's an artist they love and they see the value in that access. And I think at the time they were priced like $150, like very reasonable, right? And so that's a great example. And so the benefit there is now, not only does he have the ability to interact with his fans in really unique and innovative ways, but he can also track all of the Web3 data, right? He can look at everyone that bought his top tier pass and see how much liquidity is in all those wallets. So let's say 100 people bought the top tier pass, and then he realizes that the average wallet size of those 100 people is $1 million. Well, then he might say, you know what I want to do? I want to create a cruise with Armin, and I'm going to do a private show on a yacht for 100 people. And the tickets are going to be expensive. They're going to be like $50,000. But now I know that there are 100 people that can easily afford those. And because there's products to do this now, I can market directly to them using their wallet addresses. And also there's technology now that lets you match wallet addresses with social profiles and things like that. So think about it. Like, I'm one of those people with $1 million in my wallet. I just bought this NFT. I love Armin. I'm now on Instagram and I see like the Armin boat cruise, $50,000. And I'm like, oh, hell yeah, I'm going to go. I've got money for that. Like, think about the power of that, like both in terms of understanding your audience and also engaging your audience. Another great example of like the Web3 data is, I won't name names, but there's a big Web2 brand that came into crypto and made NFTs. You can probably figure out who it is. And what they did is they did a study and they realized that there was something like $130 million in the wallets of the folks that bought those NFTs. And I think only like 5% ever flipped the NFTs, right? Because these are fans of that brand. So now what they're doing is they're saying, well, we have customers sitting on $130 million of liquidity. How do we as a brand tap into that, right? What is that going to look like? But that's an interesting problem to solve, right? That you can't typically see in Web 2 or Web 2 data, right? So I think that's a good example, is really thinking about kind of fan clubs, fan engagement. Another thing that I saw that I thought was quite interesting was, like, let's take Taylor Swift. So I did work with Taylor Swift a little bit back in the day, right? Arguably the most passionate, engaged fan club, right? So let's just imagine that there's a DApp that exists, right? And you're a fan of Taylor and you sign up and you're rewarded with points for all different types of actions, right? She launches a new music video on YouTube. You watch it, you get some points. Every time she posts something on Instagram, you like it, you get some points. You comment, you get some points. That engagement is valuable for her. Like, it is, right? It's like free media, right? So if I'm Taylor and I create this platform that basically lets my fans support me, well, then now I also, to your point, I'm rewarding them back. I'm saying, hey, I've seen how much you've done for me. Now you've got all these points. And by the way, you can redeem those points for front row tickets at my next concert, breakfast with Taylor. But like, again, it's connecting those two worlds in ways that are very innovative and very, very cool. I just, in general, don't think celebrities should have tokens. In the future, when we have regulation clarity, maybe, but right now, absolutely not,
So in this Taylor Swift example, this is possible right now. She could do this right now. What do you think is stopping celebrities like Taylor Swift with massive audiences and massive fan bases from using blockchain technology to have a deeper connection with their fans? And I don't know. I would imagine her team is big enough where someone is advising her on this, but I guess
her dad advises her on most things. Her dad's great. He's a super smart guy, former like Wall Street guy. And by the way, like, most celebrities don't have big teams. Like, her team's fairly small. Most of the clients that I had back in the day, those were the folks that had really big teams. And I'm sure her team has grown by now. But like, when I worked with Justin Bieber, like, he had a whole company behind him, or Will Smith, a whole company, or The Rock, a whole company. Hers has always been a little bit more tight knit. But I think it's a couple reasons. I think one, let's talk more on the tech side, barrier to adoption, right? You launch this stuff now, you still have to create a wallet. You still have to connect the wallet. In the future, you'll be able to go to a website, type in an email address, type in a password. It'll auto-generate a wallet on the back end. Similar to what you see with Skale and video games, the transactions will be on the back end. So I do think there's a little bit of like, the tech needs to evolve and start to simplify, right? Which will happen over time for sure. The second reason is, I think, regulation clarity. I think, again, there is no clarity in the US. A lot of celebrities are home based in LA, now Miami. And then there's some folks in other places as well, like Texas. But again, like if you're a celebrity and you have that much money and that much influence, you tend to be risk adverse. Like I notice this in general with most clients, like, they would not, they never wanted to kick the hornet's nest because again, like they've got a big foot, and if they kick it too hard, they're going to get stung, right? And so I think the regulation clarity is another piece. And then I think the last is like perception, right? So when all these celebrity meme coins come out and start rugging people, what does that do? I think a celebrity starts to go like, well, maybe this is scammy, or maybe my fans think it's scammy. So if I do something with this, maybe my fans don't like it, or they think I'm trying to take advantage of them, right? And so I think it's kind of a combination of all three. But I do think long term, like, regulation clarity will come, simplification of tech and onboarding will come. And then I do think, again, along with regulation clarity, we'll start to see the shift because you'll see big brands come in, you'll see big media companies come in, you'll start to see the talent come in, but it's just really a matter of time. And so my personal opinion is, I want to say 5 years from now. It might be longer, candidly. It might be longer. I think most people are like, oh, shorter, 2 years. Maybe. Again, like it really hinges on regulation clarity, I think, more than anything.
Yeah, I think regulation clarity is critical at the moment. With that said, I think if it comes, it'll happen sooner than people think. If you think about how much crypto or Web3 has grown in the last 3 years and how its growth is exponential, I'm excited to see what it looks like 3 years from now.
Yeah. And I will say too, in Hollywood, like a lot of folks are very crypto curious. Like they have been for some time. I get calls every week from Hollywood friends asking me questions about crypto. But I think again, like it's very, very early for them. That industry is not very tech oriented. Like you might think they are, but they're not. And so a lot of times, like the person advising on blockchain is the same person advising on AI, the same person advising on digital and social. They're like me back in the day, the innovation person, right? And so even now, like I see, entertainment brands building on chains, and I'm like, why did you build on that chain? And it's because, again, it's like the blind leading the blind. I think what'll also happen is more natives, might jump back. Like when I came into crypto, it was a risk, right? But I said to myself, well, what's the worst that happens? Like I come into crypto for 3 years and then I go become the head of blockchain for Disney, right? And when you start to have folks like you and me inside those companies, then you'll start to see folks doing the right things. But I think right now, you don't have great Sherpas bringing them in. And then you've got scammers. I'm not even going to give him the credit of saying his name. You've got scammers, basically conning celebrities into launching meme coins, Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. You're right. It is a guy, right? It is a guy that's kind of manipulating the celebrities. I forgot about that detail. I've recently been made aware of it. That's a conversation for another time. I think we're at a good stopping point. I certainly want to have you on, Andrew, for future shows because I think that you bring on a breadth of experience. You've worked in so many different industries and had tremendous success in all of them. The last question I have for you, and it's kind of a bonus question. Okay, so bonus question. I ask this of pretty much every guest I bring on. It's supposed to be fun, but if I was to give you $100,000 right now and you could only buy crypto with it, what would that portfolio look like?
That's a great question. So let's preface with NFA, DYOR.
Yeah.
What I'm going to do? I'm going to open up my investment account because it's actually the way I would deploy the capital is very similar to how I've already deployed. I'm fully deployed. I have been since the bottom of the bear. Okay. And I'll try to kind of explain the thought process. So let me start more macro. So one of the things that I hear, because I'm friends with a lot of these, influencers, I'm friends with a lot of, heavy hitters in the industry. They tend to be very consolidated, right? They often say like, I'm all in on these 5 tokens, right? I'm the contrarian. I build effectively my own mutual funds. And again, like I understand their hypothesis and I understand their mentality, but candidly, I think that is gambling, right? Because when you think about the stock market, right, you could buy, 1 million shares of NVIDIA, but you can also buy like 1 million shares of a fund that encompasses 25 big tech companies, right? And yes, if NVIDIA goes parabolic, you can, retire your family. But at the same time, that other portfolio is going to have a portion of NVIDIA that's going to perform, but you're basically hedging your risk because you're like, well, some of these might not perform, some of these might. So the likelihood that I go up in that investment is still significantly greater, right? I think when you consolidate too much, you're really rolling the dice and you're crossing your fingers, and you never know. It's like someone could market manipulate something. There could be an exploit. Like take BitTensor. Like I had a bag of BitTensor and there was an exploit and the bag plummeted, right? But again, my bag wasn't 1/5 of my portfolio. It was probably 1/50th of my portfolio, right? And so the way I look at it is, it really depends on risk profiles. So, I'm a lot older. I'm in my 40s. So I'm not looking for ultra high risk, right? So for me, I would say probably about 50 to 75% of that is going to go into high cap type things like Bitcoin, right? Ethereum, et cetera. I realize that the upside there is less, right? But I also acknowledge that the downside is less. And so case in point, when the market dumped, shout out to Germany, thanks Germany. When the market dumped, the timeline was extremely hostile and bearish. Yeah, I lost money the same way anyone else did, but I was down a much smaller percentage than most because the bulk of my investments were in these larger cap, let's call it more stable assets compared to like small cap gems or mid caps, right? And then that other kind of 25 to 50%, and by the way, that 50% might be consolidated in like 3 or 4 things, right? It might be, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Scale, maybe like an alt one, but like not a ton, right? I'm not spreading it across every layer 2 and every alt one. It's the ones that I really believe in, right? Then that other 25 to 50%, I am deploying across more of a variety, right? So it might be, again, if it's $50 million, I might be putting that into 50 or even 100 different projects, right? And then in those projects, I am diversifying, right? So I've got, AI, but I've got high caps, mid caps, low cap AIs. I've got gaming, but I've got high caps, mid cap, low cap gaming. Maybe I have some social fi. Definitely infrastructure, because again, I look at things like interop as, at least for the short term, that is the future of this. And then the other thing I look at is, like, I know, again, this is a contrarian view. I know most folks take this standpoint of, new, bright, shiny, better. But again, like going back to kind of my traditional investment lens and also thinking about mass adoption, like I'm just going to put it this way, right? So the 95% comes in, right? And they're probably going to invest the way that they invest in the stock market, because that's what they're used to. That's what they're accustomed to. That's kind of what normies do. I mean, most normies will come in through Coinbase. They'll look at the top 50 tokens and they'll say, oh, well, this was founded by a former Ethereum guy. This has to be a good project, right? And meanwhile, we're like, I wouldn't touch that token, right? But that being said, I do think that when normies come in, they're going to look at things like, this company has been around for 10 years. This company has a substantial revenue stream. This company has continued to scale, into new industries or verticals. And so I do think like there will be at some point this shift to fundamentals where projects that have lasted multiple cycles, that are actually building sustainable businesses that are net positive in revenue, those are interesting to me. And I think my take on those is like, I do have investments in a lot of those. I do. Will they all moon this cycle? Probably not, because they're not the bright, shiny objects. But do I feel really confident about them over a 10 to 20 year time horizon? Yeah, because a lot of these other ones aren't going to be around anymore, So, yeah.
Great answer. Andrew Saunders, it's always a pleasure.
Yeah.
And if people want to find you, I know you're quite open to be DM'd on Twitter. Maybe not on Telegram until we're a bit closer, but Twitter is a good place to reach you, correct?
Yeah, so I'm at Andrew Saunders on Twitter, and then if you've never experienced Scale, either head over to @Scale Network or go to the website scale.space. But I would honestly say, like, again, if you're new to Scale, like, go play the games on the Epic Game Store. They're awesome. Go start experimenting with some of these AI projects. Like a few that I really like are I really like Chain GPT, Chirper AI is doing like some AI agent stuff. Palm AI is a little bit of like a sweetheart for many, but a lot of them are doing really, Xort, I should mention. Xort is doing some really interesting data stuff on the web, but very, very cool, innovative tech that candidly you can even, use in your everyday life. But yeah, jump in and try them all out, because again, it's gas free. And by the way, like a lot of projects are pre-TGE, so farm them, because you're not going to pay $100 in gas fees to do it.
Brilliant advice, Andrew.
Yeah.
Thank you again. Until next time.
Yeah, my pleasure. Peace.